I'm here with Jeffrey Reddick, who is the writer of the Final Destination. I don't know how to refer to it now that that new film came out.
The new one, there's another one. Yeah, no,
But the original Final, that is your craft.
That is
your original idea.
Sick Twisted Brain.
Which brings me to my first question, which is, the Final Destination was a really original idea during a time when there's just a lot of like scream slasher rips-offs. What inspired you to make, Death the villain, basically? It was a very creative idea.
The idea for the movie, actually, should I look at you or the camera?
You can look at whatever you want to look at.
Whatever.
You're the star here.
No, actually, I was on a plane trip, and I read an article, and I think it was People or something, about a woman who was on vacation, and her mother called her the night before she was supposed to fly home and said, "Don't take the flight you're on, I have a bad feeling about it." And the woman changed her flight, and the flight she was supposed to be on crashed. So I'm on a plane, I read this story, and that kind of got me thinking about it. And it percolated for a long time, and but I kept thinking, what if that woman missed her time to die? And then we haven't seen death actually.
No, I mean
as a killer. So
it's a great idea, and it sort of had a personal resonance for me because I knew somebody who was supposed to be on flight TWA 800. But the plane crashed before it reached him, and he was supposed to come back from France on it. So there's definitely an interesting resonance for me with that. It's great film. How did your original story compare to the final script?
It's always different. Like my kind of take on it, my original draft of the script, Death had a different kind of MO. Like, since Death screwed up the first time, it couldn't come back and just kill them. Okay. So it kind of played on all their guilt, almost in a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of way. Like, it kind of brought their guilt and fears to life till they killed themselves. But I actually love what Wong and Morgan did with the whole Rube Goldberg kind of death is all around us kind of thing. So, I worked at New Line Cinema, the studio that produced it, for like 11 years, and I know there's the whole development process. So I'm not really precious about my stuff if they change it for the better. So I give all props to the Wong and Morgan for the Rube Goldberg kind of device. But it had the same basic story though, but just the way that Death went after them was different. Bit, yeah. So, but I'm happy with how it turned out.
You're very familiar with the process of a film getting made, so you knew that this was inevitably going to happen.
Right, and it turned out well. So that's all that that's what really matters at the end of the day. So.
And you were involved in the writing of the script for the second one as well, or you had some story?
I wrote the story for the second one.
How did your script compare to the final product, and how did the original's changes influence the way you went about writing the sequel?
Well, definitely the whole Rube Goldberg kind of angle really, was part of how I wrote the sequel story. And tonally, I kept it the same as the first one. Like, it was very serious. I brought Alex and Clear back from the first movie. But I do like Eric Bress and J. Mackie Gruber wrote the screenplay, and I like that they actually went for a more fun kind of take on it instead of the dark tone of the series, the first one, because it's just kind of cool that a lot of movies you see the first two, all the sequels are the same exact, tonally, and the same set pieces and the same story. So it was actually, I like that they went further with it and went for the fun instead of the dark kind of tone. So I thought it was cool. I mean,
that you raise a very interesting question, though. You look at like Saw. I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head when Saw versus the Final Destination came out, but. Both of those have been series that have continued on throughout the 2000s. Saw definitely is the same idea rehashed. How have you felt about sort of the evolution of this original idea you had? I mean, it's a big franchise at this point.
You know what, I'm really great. I mean, I'm just grateful. Anytime you're a writer or an actor or anything, like if you do something that has legs, you're just grateful. Like and I'm not just saying this so people will go see the new one that's shooting, but I'm still really tight with the producer, Craig Perry, and he's told me the story for the next one, and it really does sound like they're trying to get away from the formula somewhat. Like, it's obviously people expect a certain thing, but, I think the last couple have been too formulaic. And haven't really tried that hard. So, well, I mean, you don't want them to kill the franchise.
Right. But what do you feel about, like, going to 3D, for instance? Did you feel like that was kind of gimmicky?
No, actually, when they said 3D, I'm like, this is a perfect movie for 3D because there's always, there's stuff coming at people and all around people. So I actually thought that it was perfect for this one.
Did you worry about it becoming sort of like... so focused on the 3D plot points that it kind of took away from the story?
I was hoping that it wouldn't. I don't know, like the story was pretty simple for the last one, you know. Pretty teenagers escape death and then get killed one by one. So, you know, but I think that if it's done right, it can enhance the movie. And, you know, I think the 3D, I mean, I think that was the difference between, you know, Halloween 2 opened at the same time, and, you know, the Final Destination movie trounced it. And I think a lot of it was because it's fun. Like, people know what they're getting in for when they go to the theaters. And I, you know, like something like Halloween 2 was just so dark and grim.
Yeah.
And, you know, we want to have fun watching people get killed, I think, and we don't want to sit there and see tortured girls begging for their lives and bleeding and
I mean, I think more often than not, I mean, 3D is used really gimmicky. Like, you know, Saw 3D. Everything I understand about that is it's just like total gimmick.
Guts like flying off the camera.
Which is unfortunate. There are a few that have been exceptions, and I agree that the Final Destination was one of the better ones to use it. If they brought it to you again, or like, you know, we want you to revitalize this franchise, would you be interested in returning to the?
Yeah. No, I definitely. I wouldn't want, if they weren't going to let me do something different, I wouldn't want to, because I don't want to just retell the first movie with different characters. But I mean, I definitely have had ideas. It's a tough call because the studio, once it gets to a certain point, and the Final Destination was the most successful one of all financially.
Right.
So they're going to be like, we're not going to change anything.
Oh, totally.
We're not going to change it. What? Yeah. They're like, oh, we don't see Death doing that. I'm like, whatever, you know, because Death could do whatever Death wants to do. So.
On a different note, in 2005, you wrote the script for Tamara, which is about a high school outsider getting supernatural revenge on her tormentors. What inspired you to write that?
Well, I was a really dowdy high school girl, and people picked on me. No. Obviously, Carrie was an influence. You know, I love Carrie, and I've always watched that movie and said, oh, I love it, but, you know, we have to wait till the last 20 minutes for her to, like, kick some ass. And so I was like, you know, what if somebody, you know, could come back early and just spend the whole movie kicking ass? And, you know, I've always, like, I think a lot of horror fans kind of relate to kind of the outsider status, you know, like people who are like watching horror movies all the time aren't out playing football and, you know, are being cheerleaders. And so I think it's just the theme has always appealed to me, and just the idea of having this girl who could come back and like know like the secret sins of all of her tormentors and like use those against them was kind of a cool psychological element. It got toned down. Like Lionsgate actually bought the project theatrically based on the script, and then they saw the movie and they're like, this isn't the script. And I've grown to love all of my movies eventually, because again, you have to be grateful that you're able to do what you want to do for a living. But I always tell people that Tamara's like the ABC Family version of the script I wrote. So a lot of like teenage girls like love it. Love it, love it, love it.
But that's not exactly who you originally
imagined. I wasn't quite going for the tween set, for the Taylor Lautner lovers. No, that wasn't my target.
I mean, you talk about Carrie, and obviously somebody can be like, wow, that sort of sounds like Carrie. How do you sort of like take inspiration from something without like feeling like you're copying it? You know, how do you run that?
Just copy it. No.
It's a way to success. If you're going to copy something, copying Carrie would be a great thing to copy.
You know, honestly, there aren't any original ideas. I mean, you know, Final Destination is pretty much a slasher movie with death as a slasher, if you think about it.
Well, I still think it's original.
Final Destination was pretty original. But, you know, it's just hard to come up with original ideas. So I think a lot of artists, I sounded really pretentious when I just said that. A lot of we artists, I think you go back to the things that you loved when you were younger and the things that influenced you. You know, Nightmare on Elm Street's a huge influence on me, and the psychological elements that Freddy kind of took on.
Oh, we love that
and
stuff,
you know, so you know, I think it's just you've got to put your own spin on it, and you try to take the themes maybe from a movie. Like, you know, with Carrie, it's like, yeah, she was picked on, but you know, she gets killed like really early in the movie. She's into witchcraft. She comes back as a hot chick, and you know, it's so I thought it was a different enough spin where people wouldn't.
Man, I gotta appreciate, you know, being the film lover I am, I appreciate the idea of not having to wait for the last 20 minutes for everything to happen, because you know, it's a long time.
It's a long time to wait for your money shot.
So I appreciate the payoff there. Another thing, sort of in the same vein, though, is you were involved in the remake of Day of the Dead with director Steve Miner.
You're just gonna get everything.
I'm gonna get everything done.
All right, it's all good.
Day of the Dead, the original, is, you know, considered to be a horror classic by a lot of people. what is it like to approach remaking a horror classic, and what kind of like pressures are involved in that?
Well, and all I can do in this scenario is be honest. You know, New Image owned the rights to Day of the Dead, and they'd already hired Steve Miner to direct it, and so they were looking for writers, and they were going to make it. They had a start date and everything, and I'm like, I've always really admired Steve Miner's work, and so I've always wanted to work with him, and I'm like, well, let me go in and pitch something, and so I pitched a take that was actually very close to the original. And at first they wanted to hire somebody for like $5,000 to write the movie in 2 weeks.
Jeez.
Yeah. And I was like, F that.
Yeah,
actually, I didn't say F that. I said the whole word, but
right.
I don't know if kids listen to this or watch this.
You can say whatever you want.
I said this. Because I obviously knew that there was going to be,
right.
you know, fan-like fury over it. And I definitely get that. Like, Nightmare on Elm Street is my favorite movie, and I was annoyed when they announced the remake, but you know, the fact is they were going to hire somebody to write it, and I thought, well, as a fan, why not, you know, at least I can go in there and fight the good fight. Unfortunately, once I got hired, they started making me kind of change everything that was related to the original. And I got in many a fight with certain people about certain things in the movie, because I'm like, this is a remake, and if you're going to call it a remake, you have to have certain touchstones in it. And unfortunately, as a writer, you don't really have much. You know, you don't have any clout in the movies. They treat you like crap. So at the end of the day, I think if they'd have called it Zombies Attack a Small Town, I think people would have really liked the movie for the most part. But it's, you know, I definitely knew the pressure going in, and I did fight the good fight as far as trying to keep it close. But the end result isn't what I wanted it to be. And I met Steve Miner. George Romero. I was very nervous about meeting him, and I was at a Fangoria convention, and Ken Forey, who I've gotten to know over the years, who's a great guy, like literally dragged me across the convention floor to meet George. And he hadn't seen the movie, but he was so gracious. And he's like, you know, it's a business, you know, because Ken's like, he's been terrified to meet you. And George's like, you know, this is a business, and I know how it is. And, you know, I do wish it would have been closer, you know, to what it started off to be. But again, it's hard to complain when you have something produced and other people are out there going, well, you know, what are you bitching about? You got a movie made, so it's...
I mean, you talk about Wes Craven being an influence. I think I can definitely see the parallels. I mean, we've talked about, you know, how Wes Craven would take ideas out of newspapers like Nightmare on Elm Street and inspire them. How does that sort of, you know, affect your life? Are you constantly like looking at stories that people tell? You're constantly like reading newspapers, you know, looking for inspiration? Because, you know, it's one thing to, you know, read an article about like a teenager who doesn't want to go to sleep and then dies when he finally goes to sleep, and make that Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
Or read an article about someone who said don't go on this plane, and then the plane crashes, and then turn it into something like Final Destination.
Right.
You know, how much of that, you know, do you sort of try and create original ideas, and how much do you look for inspiration? Because as you said, like everything is not original anymore.
Right.
Everything's sort of been done before to some degree.
You know, I don't constantly look for stuff, because I find when I try to do that, nothing happens. You know, like because really, actually, Final Destination was hard to set up at the studio. Even I worked for the studio, and the producers on it had a first look deal at the studio, and the studio was like, well, you can't have just death. You know, like they have to be able to fight the killer and all this stuff. So it was a tough sell, and that was where we were all stationed. So, you know, and then the minute it came out and did well, everybody's like, oh, bring us something like Final Destination. I'm like, oh, I pull one out of my right now. So I just kind of try to live my life, and you know, I watch a lot of horror films. I just love the genre, and I think more about themes of things I like to tell. Like I try to find. I'm going to be pretentious again, but I try to tell stories that have like a deeper layer than just like killing pretty people,
totally.
Which is fun, but.
It adds a certain resonance, you know, for that second viewing or third viewing, whereas, you know, you're just seeing everyone die, it's the same thing every time.
And that's why I love Wes Craven's stuff, is there's always something else going on under the surface.
Okay, so you clearly have a history with horror films, you clearly love them. Have you ever thought about, you know, breaking out of that and doing a comedy, some lighthearted?
You know what? I haven't, because I'm having too much fun doing the horror. I think people keep saying, some people tell me I'm funny. I think they're just my friends who are humoring me. So I would maybe like to try a comedy at some point. but just to try it, not like I want to get out of horror. Like I think there's so many stories you can tell in the horror genre.
I mean, is it more like, you know, if you actually naturally get an idea for a comedy, you're not just going to sit down one day and be like, you know, my comedy script, page 1.
Yeah,
go.
like it would have to be something
organic.
I can't compete with that voice. No.
So I guess the final question we have to ask is, what are you up to these days? What do we have from you that's coming out?
Well, I'm actually going out with a new script next week, which is a supernatural horror film, which I'm really excited about. I can't really say what it is yet, but
you can spoil it to our viewers. They won't tell anyone.
But it's coming. We're going out to the studio. It's called Good Samaritan. I'll tell you the name of it. And we're going out to the studios next week, so I'm excited about that. And I have a horror TV series that Gail Ann Hurd, who did the Terminator movies and Aliens, is producing. It's kind of an X-Files about near-death experiences.
I dig that idea.
So those are the two things that I'm really excited about right now. And I've been working so hard on Good Samaritan that for the last year and a half, I haven't had time to really think about anything else. So.
Okay, I actually lied. We do have one more question. People who are fans of you, where can they find more information? Do you have a website? Do you have
you can Facebook me. Yeah, you can Facebook me. I'm Facebookable. Yeah, I don't really have me and a friend put together a website years ago, but it's just kind of crappy. So yeah, just Facebook me.
Okay, there you have it. Jeffrey Reddick, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. There you go.
All right, thank you.
T-1000 can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Magneto can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Even Zod can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. It's tight, don't even try to bite the side of style. Mr. Spock can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. The Wrath of Khan can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. The Borg can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Because I've got space game and it feels alright.